Her eyes couldn't see him, but her soul knew his touch was different. The forgotten Princess Curran of the Soryari Empire had learned long ago. That silence was her sanctuary, in the grand crystal halls of the Celestial Palace, where her people's psychic abilities manifested as shimmering auras visible to all but her. She moved like a ghost through her own life, born blind to a race that prized mental sight above all else. She was considered a tragic anomaly, a royal bloodline's greatest shame. The morning light filtered through the palace's prismatic walls, casting rainbow patterns that danced just beyond her perception. Curran sat in her private chambers, fingers tracing the ancient texts written in raised Soryari script, when her personal attendant, Zephyr, entered with unusual excitement. "Your Highness," Zephyr whispered, her voice carrying the melodic tones of their species. "The Council has summoned a human linguist to assist with the Terran peace negotiations. He arrives today." Curran's fingers paused on the manuscript. Humans were rare in Soryari space, their minds considered crude and unrefined by the Empire's standards. "Why do you tell me this? Such matters are for my father and the Council." "Because," Zephyr said, settling beside her, "Queen Lyrale has requested all royal family members attend the welcoming ceremony. Even you." The words stung, though Curran had grown accustomed to being an afterthought. At 23, she had attended perhaps a dozen official functions, always positioned in the shadows where her blindness wouldn't embarrass the crown. Her younger brother, Prince Kale, with his brilliant golden aura and powerful telepathic abilities, was the true heir. She was merely a living reminder of genetic imperfection. Later that day, Curran found herself in the Harmony Chamber, a vast, circular room where the Empire conducted its most important diplomatic affairs. The crystalline walls hummed with psychic energy from the assembled Soryari nobles, their mental voices creating a symphony of thoughts she could sense, but not fully comprehend. Her own psychic abilities had never manifested properly. Another failure in her people's eyes. "Citizens of the Empire," King Valdres announced, his voice resonating through both sound and telepathic channels, "we welcome Elias Thorn of Terra, who will serve as our linguistic bridge to the human delegation." Curran heard footsteps approaching, different from the light, graceful movements of her people. These steps were heavier, more grounded, carrying a rhythm that somehow felt familiar despite being completely foreign. She sensed someone passing near her secluded corner, and then it happened. A hand brushed against hers, warm, calloused fingers that sent an electric shock through her entire being. The contact lasted only a moment, but in that instant, Curran experienced something unprecedented. Images flooded her mind, not the familiar darkness of her world, but colors she had no names for, memories that weren't her own, and an overwhelming sense of recognition that defied explanation. The human Elias had stopped walking. She could feel his presence, sense his confusion and wonder mirroring her own. Around them, the ceremony continued, but Curran felt as if the universe had narrowed to just this moment, this impossible connection. "I apologize," he said softly, his voice carrying an accent she'd never heard before. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Curran whispered, her heart racing. "What was that?" But before he could answer, Zephyr appeared at her side, gently guiding her away from the gathering crowd. "Your Highness, the ceremony is concluding. Shall I escort you back to your chambers?" As they moved through the corridors, Curran's mind reeled with possibilities. In the ancient text she studied, there were mentions of something called soul linking, a mythical bond that connected beings across species barriers. But such connections were considered legends, stories from a time when the Soryari Empire was young and desperate. That night, alone in her chambers, Curran pressed her fingers to where the human had touched her hand. The sensation lingered, along with fragments of memories that felt more real than her own experiences. For the first time in her life, her blindness felt like a gift rather than a curse, because whatever had passed between them transcended physical sight. She didn't know it yet, but Elias Thorn was lying awake in his guest quarters, staring at his hand and wondering if he was losing his mind. The linguist's Delamelius Thorn had traveled across 3 star systems to reach the Soryari homeworld, but nothing in his xenological training had prepared him for what he'd experienced. In the Harmony Chamber, As Earth's foremost expert in alien linguistics, he'd studied the Soryari language for years, fascinated by how their psychic abilities influenced their communication patterns. What he hadn't expected was to feel one of those psychic connections himself. The guest quarters assigned to him were modest by palace standards, but luxurious compared to his cramped research vessel. Crystalline walls provided a soft, ambient glow, and the furniture seemed to respond to his presence, adjusting to his human proportions. Yet for all the alien wonders surrounding him, his thoughts kept returning to that brief moment of contact with the princess. He'd researched the royal family before his rival, of course. King Valdris, the powerful telepath who ruled the empire. Queen Lyrale, whose empathic abilities made her beloved by their people. Prince Kale, the golden child whose psychic potential was said to rival the greatest Soryari in history. And then there was Princess Curran, mentioned only in footnotes, described as afflicted and withdrawn from public life. The official records said nothing about blindness, nothing about the quiet dignity with which she'd carried herself during the ceremony. They certainly said nothing about the way her touch had awakened something in his mind that he'd never known existed. Dr. Thorne, a gentle chime announced a visitor at his door. I am Counselor Nares. His Majesty requests your presence in the treaty chamber. Elias straightened his formal attire and followed the tall, elegant Soryari through corridors that seemed to pulse with living energy. The treaty chamber was smaller than the harmony chamber, but no less impressive. Its walls covered in flowing script that shifted and changed as he watched. The human delegation's demands are quite specific, King Valdris explained without preamble. His mental voice carried undertones that Elias's translation device struggled to interpret. They require trade agreements written in what they call absolute language, no metaphor, no cultural nuance. Such communication is alien to us. For the next 3 hours, Elias worked with the Soryari scribes, translating complex diplomatic concepts into the stark, literal language his own species preferred. It was exhausting work, made more difficult by the way his mind kept wandering to thoughts of Curran. Several times, he caught himself touching the hand that had brushed against hers, as if trying to recapture that moment of impossible connection. You seem distracted, Dr. Thorne, Queen Lyrale observed during a break in negotiations. Her empathic abilities were legendary, and Elias felt suddenly exposed under her gentle scrutiny. Is something troubling you? Just fatigue? Your Majesty, the psychic resonance in your palace is intense for a human mind. She studied him with eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. Indeed, some connections transcend species. Barriers, do they not? Ancient bonds that even we do not fully understand. Before Elias could respond, a commotion in the corridor drew their attention. Prince Kale burst into the chamber, his golden aura flickering with agitation. Father, we have a problem. The human delegation is demanding a private audience with our linguistic expert. They claim there are discrepancies in the preliminary translations that could void the entire treaty. King Valdris's mental voice carried a note of irritation. Very well, Dr. Thorne. You will meet with them tomorrow. In the meantime, I suggest you familiarize yourself with our historical archives. Understanding our past may help you navigate our future. That evening, Elias found himself in the palace's vast library, surrounded by crystalline data cores that hummed with stored knowledge. He'd intended to research Soryari history, but instead found himself searching for references to something called soul linking. The few mentions he found were fragmentary, mostly dismissed as primitive superstition. You won't find much about it in the official records. Elias spun around to find Princess Curran standing in the library's entrance, guided by her attendant. Even in the dim light, she moved with surprising grace, her unseeing eyes somehow finding his direction. Your Highness, I didn't expect. Few people do, she said with a slight smile. May I join you? I know these archives better than most. As she approached, Elias felt that same electric anticipation he'd experienced during their first contact, when she settled into the chair beside him, careful not to touch but close enough that he could sense her warmth. He realized that whatever was happening between them was far from over. Tell me about soul linking, he said quietly. Her smile deepened. First, tell me about the memories that aren't your own. Forbidden knowledge of crystal archives hummed softly round them, as Curran's fingers danced across the luminescent surfaces of ancient data cores. In the library's subdued lighting, with only the soft attendant zephyr nearby, the space felt intimate and removed from the palace's political machinations. Soul linking, Curran began, her voice barely above a whisper, is mentioned in the oldest Soriari texts from before our empire, when we were still explorers rather than conquerors. The records describe bonds that could form between any sentient beings, regardless of species or psychic ability. Elias leaned closer, studying her profile in the crystalline glow. What happened to that knowledge? The same thing that happens to all inconvenient truths, she replied, accessing another data core with practiced ease. It was buried, dismissed as fantasy. When the Empire expanded, and we encountered other species, the Council decided that interspecies bonding was a threat to Soriari purity. The texts were restricted, the researchers silenced, but you've studied them. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. I've had little else to do with my time. While my brother learned statecraft and psychic combat, I was left to wander the forgotten corners of our history. I became fascinated by the stories of the ancients, particularly their beliefs about consciousness and connection. She activated a new data core, and holographic text appeared in the air between them, script that shifted and flowed like living light. This is from the Chronicle of First Contact, written over 1,000 years ago. Listen, when two souls recognize each other across the void, neither distance nor difference can sever their bond. The link transcends flesh, transcends thought, transcends even death itself. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. And you believe that's what happened to us in the Harmony Chamber? I don't just believe it, Curran said, turning to face him fully. I know it. When you touched my hand, I saw through your eyes for the first time in my life. I saw the ceremony, saw the colors of the assembled nobles' auras, saw myself as you saw me. The admission hung between them like a charged particle. Elias reached out instinctively, stopping just short of touching her hand. I felt it too. Your memories, your emotions. For a moment, I understood what it was like to navigate a world through senses I'd never experienced. There's more, Curran said, her voice growing urgent. The ancient texts speak of soul-linked pairs developing shared abilities. The human partner might gain psychic sensitivity, while the Soriari partner's existing abilities could be amplified or transformed. Is that why you can sense me so clearly now, even from across the room? She nodded. And why you've been having dreams that aren't your own, experiencing emotions that feel foreign yet familiar. Elias started. He hadn't mentioned the strange dreams that had plagued him since their first meeting, visions of flying through space without a ship, of communicating through pure emotion, of a love that spanned galaxies. How did you? Because I've been having them too, she said softly. We're linked now, Elias. The question is, what do we do about it? Before he could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the library. Curran tensed, her hand moving to quickly deactivate the holographic display. Sister, there you are. Prince Kel's voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Father has been looking for you. The Council's decreed treaty chamber buzzed with tension as the human delegation presented their final demands. Ambassador Helena Cross, a stern woman with silver hair and calculating eyes, spread holographic documents across the negotiation table while her security chief, Commander Voss, stood vigilant nearby. The Federation requires absolute linguistic precision, Ambassador Cross declared, her voice cutting through the chamber's psychic harmonics. These preliminary translations contain metaphorical elements that our legal experts find problematic. Elias worked frantically to bridge the gap between human literalism and Soriari conceptual communication, but his concentration kept fracturing. Since his conversation with Curran in the library 3 days ago, their connection had grown stronger, more insistent. He could feel her presence like a constant whisper in his mind, her emotions bleeding into his own thoughts. King Valdris's mental voice carried undertones of growing impatience. Dr. Thorne, perhaps you could clarify the human position on territorial mining rights. Of course, Your Majesty. Elias forced himself to focus on the complex legal language, but as he spoke, he became aware of a new presence in the chamber. Curran had entered quietly, taking her usual position in the shadows near the eastern wall. The moment she arrived, the soul link between them flared with such intensity that he stumbled over his words. "Dr. Thorne?" Ambassador Cross's sharp voice cut through his distraction. "Are you quite all right? My apologies." The psychic resonance in this chamber is overwhelming, but across the room, Prince Kel's golden eyes had fixed on his sister with sudden understanding. The prince's own powerful psychic abilities had clearly detected the emotional surge that had passed between Curran and the human linguist. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm to something darker. The negotiations continued for another hour, but Elias felt the weight of Kel's scrutiny like a physical presence. When the session finally concluded, he lingered in the chamber, ostensibly organizing his translation notes, but actually waiting for a chance to speak with Curran. "Dr. Thorne," Queen Lirele's gentle voice made him look up. "A word, if you please." The Queen's empathic abilities were legendary, and as she approached, Elias felt her consciousness brush against his, not invasive, but unmistakably present. Her eyes, a deep violet that seemed to hold starlight, studied him with compassionate concern. "You're experiencing something unprecedented, aren't you?" she said softly. There was no point in denying it. "Your Majesty, I know what you're feeling," she interrupted gently. "The pull, the recognition, the sense that you've found something you didn't know you were missing. I felt the same way when I met Valdris, though our bond was between members of the same species. Then you understand. I understand that you're in terrible danger," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Both of you. There are factions within the High Council who view any dilution of Soryari bloodlines as an existential threat if they discover what's happening between you and my daughter." Before Elias could respond, the chamber doors burst open. High Counselor Thane strode in, flanked by 2 members of the Psychic Guard elite warriors whose mental abilities could paralyze or kill with a thought. Behind them walked Prince Kale, his young face set in grim determination. "Dr. Thorne," Counselor Thane's voice carried the authority of absolute power. "You will come with us." Immediately, Curran rose gracefully, her face settling into the neutral expression Elias was beginning to recognize as her public mask. "Brother, I was simply showing Dr. Thorne our historical archives." As father suggested, Kel's golden eyes flickered between them, his psychic abilities no doubt picking up the emotional resonance in the room. "How thorough of you. Dr. Thorne, the human delegation requires your immediate attention. There are concerns about tomorrow's negotiations." As Elias stood to leave, Curran's hand brushed against his, a deliberate contact that sent another surge of shared sensation through both of them. In that instant, he felt her determination, her growing courage, and something else that made his heart skip, the beginning of love. "Until tomorrow," she said aloud, but her eyes conveyed a different message entirely. Walking through the palace corridors with Prince Kale, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, evaluated. The prince's casual questions about his research interests and his impressions of Soryari culture felt like an interrogation, wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. "My sister is quite knowledgeable about our history," Kale said as they approached the diplomatic wing, perhaps too knowledgeable for her own good. "She sometimes forgets that not all knowledge is meant to be shared." The warning was subtle, but unmistakable. Elias met the prince's gaze steadily. "I find her insights invaluable. Understanding a people's history is crucial to understanding their present." "Indeed," Kale replied, his smile never wavering. "Just remember, Dr. Thorne, that some histories are best left undisturbed. The future of our species depends on maintaining certain boundaries." That night, alone in his quarters, Elias stared at the ceiling and felt Curran's presence like a warm glow in his mind. Somewhere in the palace, she was thinking of him too, and for the first time since arriving on the Soryari homeworld, he felt truly at home. The Queen stepped forward, her own considerable presence flaring with protective energy. "Thane, what is the meaning of this? A violation of the most sacred laws of our people." The counselor replied, his ancient eyes blazing with righteous fury. "This human has formed an illegal psychic bond with a member of the royal family. Such contamination cannot be tolerated. Elias felt his world tilting. How did you? My son is not only gifted but dutiful, the counselor said, gesturing to Kale when he sensed the unnatural resonance between you and the princess. He immediately reported it to the proper authorities. The betrayal hit Elias like a physical blow, but it was nothing compared to the anguish he felt through his connection to Curran. Somewhere in the palace, she had felt everything: the accusation, the fear, the crushing weight of discovery. The High Council has convened an emergency session, Counselor Thane continued. You are charged with psychic contamination of a royal bloodline, punishable by immediate execution. The princess will be subjected to neural purification to sever the link and remove any trace of human influence. No, Queen Lyrale said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystalline walls resonate. I will not allow this. Valdris will not allow this. The king has already been informed, Thane replied coldly. He is reviewing the situation. In the meantime, both the human and the princess are to be held in isolation until the council renders its final judgment. As the psychic guards moved to escort him away, Elias felt Curran's presence blazing in his mind, not with fear, but with fierce determination. Through their link, he sensed her making a decision that would change both their lives forever. The ancient text she had studied spoke of soul-linked pairs whose bonds were so powerful they could reshape reality itself. Tonight, they would discover if those legends were true. This isn't over, Elias said as the guards flanked him. Counselor Thane's smile was cold as deep space. For your sake, human, I hope it is. The power of connection. The isolation chamber, deep beneath the celestial palace, was designed to contain the most dangerous psychic criminals in the Empire. Its walls were lined with nullstone, a rare mineral that blocked telepathic abilities, and the air itself seemed to thrum with suppressive energy. For most Soriari, confinement here meant complete sensory deprivation, a torture worse than death for a telepathic species. But Elias wasn't Soriari, and his connection to Curran transcended the conventional psychic channels the nullstone was designed to disrupt. He sat in the center of the crystalline cell, focusing on the warm pulse of awareness that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. Through their soul link, he could feel Curran's presence in her own confinement chamber, several levels above. She was frightened but determined, and beneath her surface emotions, he sensed something else, a growing power that neither of them fully understood. Can you hear me? Her voice whispered through their connection, clearer than any spoken word. I'm here, he responded, marveling at how natural this form of communication had become. Are you hurt? Not physically. But Elias, there's something I need to tell you. The neural purification process they're planning, it's not just about severing our link. They intend to erase my memories of you completely, to make me forget that this connection ever existed. The thought sent ice through his veins. We won't let that happen. How can we stop them? You're human, you have no psychic defenses against their technology. And I'm nothing special. A blind princess who's been hidden away her entire life. You're wrong, Elias said, his mental voice growing stronger. Through our link, I can see what you really are. Your blindness isn't a disability, it's made. You're sensitive to forms of consciousness that the rest of your people can't perceive. You're not broken, Curran. You're evolved. Above them, in the royal chambers, the High Council had convened for their final deliberation. King Valdris sat upon his crystal throne, his face a mask of controlled anguish as Counselor Thane presented the charges. The contamination is complete, Thane declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. Our sensors indicate that the link between the princess and the human has grown exponentially stronger since their initial contact. If we don't act immediately, the bond could become permanent. And what of the treaty negotiations? Queen Lyrale asked, her empathic abilities radiating protective fury. The humans will not take kindly to the execution of their representative. The humans will be told that Dr. Thorne suffered a psychological breakdown due to psychic exposure, Prince Kale said, his young voice carrying disturbing certainty. Such incidents are not uncommon when primitive minds encounter advanced consciousness. But as the council debated, something extraordinary was happening in the depths of the palace. The soul link between Curran and Elias, strengthened by their Emotional connection, and refined by their shared experiences, was beginning to resonate with the ancient psychic foundations of the celestial palace itself. Do you feel that? Curran's voice carried wonder and growing excitement. The palace is responding to us. Elias closed his eyes and extended his consciousness through their link. Through Curran's supernatural sensitivity, he could perceive the vast network of crystalline matrices that powered the palace's systems. More than that, he could sense the accumulated psychic energy of 1,000 years of Soriari civilization, stored in the very walls around them like a vast battery of consciousness. The ancient texts spoke of this, Curran continued, her excitement building. When a soul link reaches its full potential, it can tap into the collective psychic memory of an entire world. But I never thought, it's not just your world, Elias realized, his awareness expanding beyond anything he'd thought possible. I can feel the human delegation upstairs, their thoughts, their fears, their hopes for this treaty. And beyond that, Curran, I can sense every living consciousness on this planet. The nullstone walls of their prison cells began to resonate with a harmonic frequency that hadn't been heard in the palace for centuries. Throughout the structure, crystal rays started to pulse with synchronized light as the soul link between the two prisoners interfaced with the palace's core systems. In the council chamber, alarms began to sound. What's happening? King Valdris demanded, his telepathic senses overwhelmed by the waves of psychic energy radiating from below. Impossible, Counselor Thane whispered, his ancient face pale with shock. The old systems are activating, the ones from the time of first contact, through the palace's communication networks, powered by the amplified soul link. Curran's voice suddenly rang out clear and strong, heard by every consciousness. In the celestial palace, my people, for too long we have allowed fear to divide us from the galaxy beyond our borders. We have forgotten the wisdom of our ancestors, who taught that consciousness recognizes no boundaries of species or form. Today, I stand before you not as a flawed princess, but as proof that our greatest strength lies not in our purity, but in our ability to connect with all sentient life in the deepest cell. Elias felt the full power of their bond flowing through him. His human perspective, combined with Curran's psychic sensitivity and the palace's ancient systems, created something unprecedented, a bridge between species that could reshape both civilizations. The treaty that Dr. Thorne has been helping U.S. negotiate is more than a trade agreement, Curran continued, her voice carrying to the human delegation above. It's an opportunity to create a new kind of alliance, one based not on conquest or submission, but on the understanding that consciousness itself is the most precious thing in the universe. As the palace's systems reached full synchronization with their soul link, the nullstone walls of their cells simply dissolved, not destroyed, but transformed back into the regular crystal that had originally formed the palace's foundation. Hand in hand, Curran and Elias walked through the corridors toward the council chamber, their combined consciousness blazing like a beacon of hope in the galactic darkness. When they entered the chamber, the assembled nobles, human delegates, and royal family fell silent. Curran's eyes, though still blind to light, seemed to shine with an inner radiance that made everyone present feel truly seen. For the first time, Your Majesties, Ambassador Cross said, her voice filled with awe, perhaps we should reconsider the terms of this treaty. It seems we have much more to learn from each other than we originally thought. King Valdris looked at his daughter Ely, looked at her and saw not a disappointment, but the future of both their species. Indeed, he said softly, perhaps it's time we remembered that love, not fear, is the force that built the stars. As Curran and Elias stood together before the assembled representatives of two worlds, their soul link pulsed with promise. They had chosen love over tradition, connection over isolation, and in doing so, they had opened a door to a future where consciousness could flourish without boundaries. The galaxy would never be the same.